Hi everyone, it's a pleasure to be speaking to you all. My name is Brian Yim. I'm here today with Concordia Vision Labs, and I'll be presenting a talk titled, Oh My Bot, Religiosity is Unrelated to Willingness to Engage with Sex Robots. 84% of the world's population identify with a religious affiliation, with the three largest groups being Christians, Muslims, and Hindus. While these major religions differ in rules and customs around sex, they mostly hold and promote conservative sexual scripts and values. Values such as chastity, modesty, and keeping sexual acts strictly within marriage. In turn, such views and values can influence our sexuality and intimacy, along with our intimate attitudes, behaviors, and partner choices. But how does this influence our attitudes and behaviors toward erotic technologies, such as sex robots? The objectives of this study are to examine the direct association between religiosity and willingness to engage with sex robots, and also to examine whether this association varies across genders. Based on previous research, we hypothesized that the more religious people are, the less likely they will engage with sex robots. We also hypothesized that gender will moderate this association. Our sample included 437 adults, including 265 women, 147 men, and 21 gender non-conforming individuals. Participants rated how religious they are on a 6-point Likert scale, ranging from 0, not at all, to 5, very high. Willingness to engage with sex robots was measured also on a 6-point Likert scale. Correlational analysis found no significant association between levels of religiosity and willingness to engage with sex robots, with support of the null hypothesis over our research hypothesis. We also found that gender did not moderate this relationship. Therefore, both of our hypotheses were not supported. Contrary to our expectations, these results suggest that one's level of religiosity does not predict one's willingness to engage with sex robots, and that this effect does not vary across genders. These results suggest that religiosity may not always be as relevant to the willingness to engage with sex robots. Rather, perhaps reasons such as non-religious conservative sexual attitudes and other individual factors may be more closely associated with negative attitudes towards sex robots. Nonetheless, our study was the first to analyze this relationship and shows that the association between religiosity and willingness to engage with sex robots may not be as straightforward as previously assumed and suggested. With that in mind, future studies should examine and re-examine these factors across genders, cultures, and religions. This research is important. As both robots and sex robots become more ubiquitous in our lives, it is imperative for us to understand the inner workings of our attitudes toward them.
Hi everyone, I'm here to present my talk titled My Dear Robot, The More Human You Are, the More I Would Love You. The way people perceive sex robots as subjects or objects can influence how they interact with them. Anthropomorphism is the tendency to apply human characteristics to non-human animals or objects, such as robots, thus perceiving them as more subject-like than object-like. This is especially relevant to sex robots, as more and more realistic sex robots hit the market. Past research has found that both men and women generally view sex with robots as more similar to masturbation and using a vibrator than having sex with a human partner. However, there's a lack of research on whether the extent to which people anthropomorphize sex robots influences their willingness to engage erotically with such machines. Thus, this study assesses whether perceiving sex robots as more like human sexual partners or tools of sexual stimulation affects people's willingness to have sex or fall in love with them. We hypothesized that considering sex with a robot as more similar to sexual activities with a human partner will be positively related to willingness to engage erotically with such machines. To test this hypothesis, we collected a sample of 451 adults between the ages of 18 and 71 who completed an online survey of attitudes toward and reasons to have a sex robot. The questionnaire included items about sex robot anthropomorphism, such as whether having sex with a robot was more like masturbation or sex with a partner, The survey also asked about their willingness to try a sex robot, use one regularly, fall in love with a robot, and have a non-sexual robot. We used a measure of sex robot anthropomorphism that was on a scale from 1 to 10, with 1 being the least anthropomorphic, or most like an object, to 10 being most anthropomorphic, or most like a human. This score was created by averaging scores from the questions, is having sex with a robot more like masturbation or more like sex with a partner? And is having sex with a robot more like using a sex toy or more like having sex with a human? Correlational analysis mostly confirmed our hypothesis, with weak to moderate positive associations between willingness to engage erotically with robots and people's perception of having sex with these machines as more like having sex with a human partner. The association between people's perception of sex robots as more like a human partner and their willingness to love a robot is especially notable. The more that people consider having sex with robots to be like sex with a human partner, the more they would be willing to try a sex robot or fall in love with such a machine. These results can help researchers and developers understand their users' perception of these machines to inform future decisions regarding the features that they may want to include for their customers. These findings provide the first quantitative evidence that people are more interested in engaging erotically with robots if they view them as more human-like, which is an important first step in developing a broader knowledge of sex robots and their potential users. Future research should examine whether this holds true when people are faced with actual, more or less realistic, human-like robots. Such research is important as the erotic capabilities of sex robots continue to increase and their physical features approach human-likeness.
With the increase of innovative technologies in humans' sexual spheres, robotic companions such as sex robots are rapidly emerging. Still, little is known about who may be interested in these machines. Hello everyone, and thank you for attending my presentation. My name is Rachel Hu. In this presentation, I'll compare the differences in the willingness to engage erotically with machines between LGBTQ2A+ and heterosexual identifying individuals. According to Vilner and Huff, the sex tech industry experienced drastic phases to not only appeal to consumers, but also change the narrative around sexual wellness. The original narrative portrayed sex toys as dirty and needing to be hidden. The second reshaped it in a more hedonistic and naughtier image, while the most recent conversation around sex toys embraced safe and modern technology, elevating and legitimizing the field of sexual wellness, which encouraged more people to engage with sex toys. When analyzing the consumer population, researchers found that individuals who identified with an LGBTQ2A+ sexuality were more interested in sex toy involving sexual behaviors compared to heterosexuals, as noted in a 2017 Canadian survey where lesbians were twice as likely to use a sex toy, while bisexuals were 10 times more likely. Wood and colleagues suggested this greater preference within the community may be due to their greater openness towards sexual identities, orientations, and a generally wider range of exhibited sexual behaviors. This being said, little is known about whether or not willingness to erotically engage with sex robots differs based on people's sexual identity. In light of previous findings, we hypothesized that members of the LGBTQ2A+ community may be more interested in sex robots than heterosexuals, possibly due to these machines having the potential to satisfy their sexual needs. In our study, we had a sample of 434 participants aged between 18 and 71, while 146 were part of the LGBTQ2A+ community. Participants completed a series of questionnaires, including questions regarding their willingness to engage with sex robots on a 6-point Likert scale, with questions such as, would you try a sex robot? Through an independent sample t-test, we found that LGBTQ2A+ identifying people were significantly more willing to try regularly use and fall in love with a sex robot compared to heterosexual identifying individuals. These findings indicate that this community is an important untapped market due to their strong interest, which can drastically change the narrative around sex tech, including sex robots. Creating queer sex robots would be a major step towards inclusivity, flexibility, and good social responsibility, since these machines would not only be more adaptable to the community, but most importantly, advocating for queer robots allows us to be more socially responsible in the development of technology for greater human sexual wellness. Future research should examine the specific underlying reasons why this community might want such machines and explore how this compares to that of people with technology-based sexualities, such as love doll users or VR porn consumers, as these may bring important inputs into the development of artificial erotic agents.
It's a pleasure to be here to present our research titled, Would You Have Sex with a Robot? Just asking the question influences the answer. Sex robots are coming, but as they're not yet widely accessible for scientific or personal use, researchers must rely on hypothetical, self-report questions to determine people's attitudes toward them. Research has demonstrated that survey questions may actually have an effect on those responding to them. The wording and order of questions and the ideas provoked in a survey can linger in the mind of the survey taker, thus affecting their responses to subsequent questions. This phenomenon, known as a survey effect, is especially prevalent in surveys about new or unfamiliar topics, a category into which sex robots likely fall for most people. This study will assess whether answering questions about sex robots affects participants' willingness to engage erotically with them. We hypothesize that, compared to their baseline, participants will be more willing to engage with sex robots after having answered a survey about them. To test this hypothesis, we recruited participants to complete an online survey which asked about their attitudes toward and reasons to have a sex robot, and their willingness to engage erotically with robots at both the beginning and the end of the survey. We also asked them whether the survey had changed their views towards sex robots. After excluding those who did not complete the entire questionnaire, we were left with a sample of 315 adults between the ages of 18 and 71 at the end of the survey. Most of the sample reported that the survey did change their attitudes of sex robots to some extent. 70.5% of the sample were also more open to the idea of having sex with robots than they were at the start of it. Results of this study suggest that surveys about sex robots can influence people's attitude toward these machines. These are important methodological findings that should inform future researchers of erotic technologies of the possibility of a survey effect, and encourage them to take this effect into account in their studies, questionnaires, and interpretations. Despite being limited by a self-selected sample of individuals who may have generally been more open to erotic engagement with robots than the general population, this study still provides the first evidence in support of a survey effect in sex robot research. Such methodological studies are essential to improve the quality of research on erobotics and behavioral sciences.